Okay, take your Bibles, and before we start in the book of Numbers, I want to show you something that I have noticed that I think bears pointing out. The Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, are a group. They're a unit. Moses writes them all. A good deal of them, Genesis and Exodus, he writes concerning things before he's even of age, which is interesting in and of itself. But the book of Genesis stands by itself. It's the book of beginnings. But there we do see the 4 divine institutions, and we see the conception of the nation of Israel, covering almost 2,400 years. So the book of Genesis stands by itself. Then the first chapter or so of Exodus covers the balance of the 400 years as the nation of Israel multiplies in Egypt. But beginning with the Exodus itself, you have a 40-year period between the exodus of the nation of Israel out of Egypt to their entering in of the land. And that 40-year period is covered in the book of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Now, Exodus, we see the birth of the nation, and go to Exodus chapter 19. Exodus chapter 19. You can actually figure out the 40 years almost to the month. They come out of Egypt, and that's when their calendar begins. Begins with the first Passover. So we come to the Exodus chapter 19. It says, in the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone out of the land of Egypt. So there we have 3 months that have passed. And then Moses receives the law. He receives the instructions for the tabernacle. We have the interruption with the golden calf. Jump ahead to chapter number 40. So you got 3 months from the Exodus to Mount Sinai. Then there's a short journey. They go through the Red Sea. They receive the instructions and the blueprints for the tabernacle and construct it. Exodus chapter 40 and verse number 17. Exodus 40 and verse 17. And it came to pass in the 1st month, in the 2nd year, on the 1st day of the month, that the tabernacle was reared up. So there you have 1 year from the Exodus to the close of the book of Exodus. Then go with me, what comes after Exodus? The book of Leviticus. But go to Numbers chapter 1 and verse 1. Numbers chapter 1 and verse 1. Says this, and the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tabernacle of the congregation on the 1st day of the 2nd month in the 2nd year after they were come out of the land of Egypt. So you know what that tells you? That tells you the book of Leviticus covers 30 days. Moses receives all of that information and is recording it and gives it to the nation of Israel. So you've got 3 months, then you've got a year. That when you come to the end of Exodus, now you've got another 30 days. So then, go with me to the book of Numbers chapter 9. Numbers chapter 9. The children of Israel begin journeying. They're conceived in Exodus. They're conceived in Genesis, birthed in Exodus, instructed in Leviticus. Then they begin to be numbered and to begin to journey. Numbers chapter 9, verse 1, and the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the 1st month of the 2nd year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, that's actually a flashback. That's a flashback to the end of the book of Exodus when they're instructed about the Passover. They're instructed to keep the Passover there at that point. So we have 3 months, and then we have a year. We're in the 2nd year, the 2nd Passover. Come with me to the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, chapter number 1. Deuteronomy, chapter number 1, and verse 3. Deuteronomy, chapter number 1, and verse 3. So where does the book of Deuteronomy pick up? It picks up after the events of the book of Numbers, the wandering and so on, and the dying off of the first generation, and so on. Verse 3, and it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first day of the month, that Moses spake unto the children of Israel according to all that the Lord had given him in commandment. So where are you now? You're in the 40th year. So you've had 12, 15 months covered in the book of Exodus from the coming out. Here you're in the 40th year, in the first day of the 11th month. How many months are there in a year? There's 12. So you've got 30 days, and then 30 days would take you to the first day of the 12th month. Then you got the 12th month, and you'd have a full 40 years, wouldn't you? Go with me to Deuteronomy chapter 2. Deuteronomy chapter 2 and verse 14. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 14. In the space in which we came from Kadesh Barnea until we were come over the brook Zered. And Zered is a little brook or river at the south of the Dead Sea. So Israel is now, at this point, they're making their way up towards the land of Canaan. They're going to enter from the east, cross the Jordan River, and do Jericho. That we were come over the brook of Zered was 38 years until all the generation of the men of war were wasted from among the host, as the Lord sware unto them. So you got 38 years. The book of Numbers covers about 38 years. You've got the year that they came out and then they constructed the tabernacle. You've got 30 days with the book of Leviticus. You got 3 months from the journey from Egypt to Sinai. It's just interesting how you can put all this stuff together. One more verse. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 34. Deuteronomy chapter 34 and verse 8. The book of Deuteronomy ends with the death of Moses. Moses gives the book of Deuteronomy and begins to speak in the first day of the 11th month. Moses is told, you're going to go up and you're going to die. Verse number 8, 34:8. And the children of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning for Moses were ended. Those 30 days are going to be the last 30 days of the 40th year. So the book of Deuteronomy covers how much time? 2 months. The 30 days that Moses gives the second generation, the book of the rehearsal of the law and the challenge to go in and possess the land. Then you have the book of Joshua that opens up with after the death of Moses, and Israel is getting ready, as the book of Joshua opens, to celebrate another Passover, which pops up in the book of Joshua. I believe it's chapter number 5. It's just fascinating as Israel's getting ready to go. Yeah, Joshua chapter 5 and verse 10. And the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even in the plains of Jericho. That's going to be the Passover in the first month of the 41st year. So all the stuff that transpires with the spies and the going to Jericho with Rahab and so on, all of that covers about 2 weeks. It's just kind of interesting, and you can read through Joshua and you see the next day, and then they were 3 days here, and then they came back and so on. It's just kind of fun to put all that stuff together. Anyway, the point I want to make, Genesis stands by itself. Exodus and Leviticus go together. Exodus records events. Leviticus gives you doctrine. The book of Numbers records events that cover about 38 years, give or take a little bit. Now, there's a lot of doctrine in the book of Numbers, but it's technical information. But Numbers is a book of events, covers 38 years. Deuteronomy is the second giving of the law. So you have events in Exodus, doctrine in Leviticus, you have events in Numbers, and then doctrine in Deuteronomy. It's just really kind of interesting that you can figure all that stuff out. The Bible's very precise, and it's fun to look at. So let's go back to Numbers. I want to just give you kind of an overview. We'll probably get about the first 20 chapters or so of Numbers. And I'm not going to give you all the data and the crunching of the numbers. You can do that on your own. It's fascinating as you go through the chapters and you get all these numbers. It'll really make you be a Bible student. I have all those numbers of each tribe written in the margin of my Bible. And then you add them up and you get the totals, and it comes up just right on the button. So anyway, Numbers, the book of Numbers opens, and the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tabernacle of the congregation on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt. So they're still at Sinai. The book of Leviticus is given, God speaks out of the tabernacle, and he also speaks from the Mount Sinai in the book of Leviticus, but they're still there. So now they're getting ready. They've got the tabernacle, they've been instructed, they got the book of Leviticus, they're ready to start their walk and their journey toward the promised land. First thing they do, verse 2, take ye the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel after their families by the house of their fathers, with the number of their names, every male by their polls, from 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go forth to war in Israel. Thou and Aaron shall number them by their armies. And with you there shall be a man of every tribe, one head of the house of his fathers. Here you get some indication about the structure and the government in Israel that has been formed already. There's going to be a head guy that represents each one of the 12 tribes. And so they begin to be numbered here. And you have all of these numbers from 20 years old upward that are able to go forth to war. And each tribe is listed. You have Reuben listed first, then Simeon, then Gad, then Judah, then Issachar, Zebulun. After Zebulun, if you look at verse 31, those who were numbered of them, even the tribe of Zebulun, were 50 and 7,400. Then you have verse 32, of the children of Joseph, namely of the children of Ephraim by their generations. Now, Joseph is one of the 12 sons of Jacob, correct? He was the next to the last one in line. But Joseph is not going to be a tribe all by himself. Joseph, his two boys that he gave birth to in Egypt, Ephraim and Manasseh, are going to split the family of Joseph, and Ephraim is going to be a tribe and Manasseh is going to be a tribe. The reason they do that is because the tribe of Levi is separated out because of the ministry of the priesthood. So you actually have 13 tribes, don't you? But the Levites are totally separate. So you have Ephraim in verse 32 and 33, and then you have Manasseh in verse 34 and 35, and then Benjamin, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. Verse 46, even all that were numbered were 600,000 and 3,550. And if you take all those numbers for those 12 tribes, separating out the Levite, it comes out. You add them all up. You do it with your calculator. It's just how accurate the scriptures are. So the Levites, verse 47, after the tribe of their fathers, were not numbered among them. The Levites weren't numbered among the army. You've got 603,550 men ready to go to war. And if each one of those men are married and have one kid, then that's where you get the number approximately 2 million or more of the total population of the nation of Israel, women and children and so on. It's just a guesstimate. We don't have a number of the total population. But that's the size. That's how much Israel has grown in the 40 years. Not the 40 years, in the 400 years as they come out of, and after they come out of Egypt. So they're going into the land of Canaan, and they're really a drop in the bucket. They're the fewest of all the numbers of the nations of men, and God's going to strike a blow with His nation, with all of the other nations that are more firmly established. So you see all those numbers laid out. Numbers chapter 2, you have the layout of the camp. And as I read this, and you see how precise and how logical and how meticulous because you got 2 million people. You've got to have some structure. You've got to have some order, because this 2 million people are going to up and move in an instant. There's just a marvelous layout of all the details of how all of this works. The camp is laid out in 4 groups of the 3 tribes. There's 4 clusters of 3 tribes, and they form a square, and the tabernacle is right in the middle with the Levites and the sons of Aaron there. And you have the east side, the eastern camp in verse 2, goes and names the tribe. Verse 10, and the south side shall be the standard of the camp of Reuben. Reuben was the leader of that through. Judah was the leader of the first 3. Verse 18, on the west side, the standard of the camp of Ephraim according to their armies, and the captain of the sons of Ephraim, there's the leader there. Ephraim has Manasseh and Benjamin in his tribe, and that's to the west, their camp. And then you have in verse 20, the tribe of Manasseh. Manasseh was with Ephraim. Verse 25, the standard on the camp of Dan shall be on the north side by their armies, and the captain of the children of Dan, and you have Dan and Asher and Naphtali there. So there's this marvelous layout that you have there. Chapter 3, they count the Levites. Now this is where it gets a little sticky. I haven't been able to reconcile all of the numbers. I just haven't spent the time to do all that. But the Levites are separated out. There's 3 sons of Aaron, and they're given instructions, and they're numbered and counted. You have Kohath, Gershon, and Merari, and each of those are numbered and laid out there. So it's the very meticulous thing, and all of these things are laid out. And each of those 3 sons of Aaron are given responsibility with a segment of the tabernacle. Gershon has the coverings. Kohath is to carry the furniture, and Merari is to carry the structure. And they each have certain numbers of wagons to carry all that hardware and all the cloths and all the thing, except the furniture. That's carried without any wagons, I believe. So it's chapter 4. So all of these things are just meticulously laid out. Chapter 4 is the chapter 4. You have some information about the priests. Chapter 4, verse 3, as they're going to be instructed as to how they minister. Chapter 4, verse 3, from 30 years old, even upward until 50 years old, all that enter into the host to do the work of the tabernacle of the congregation. So when did a priest begin his labor, his office? His office began at the age of 30. How old was the Lord when he began his earthly ministry? 30 years old. He's a prophet, he's a priest, and he's a king. He begins at 30 years old. The instructions and the responsibilities for each of the priests are laid out there. Go to chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8. You have some more instructions about the priesthood. Chapter 6 and 7. Chapter 7, notice this. Chapter 7, verse 1. And it came to pass on the day that Moses had fully set up the tabernacle and had anointed it and sanctified it, and all the instruments thereof were both of the altar and the vessels thereof, and had anointed them and sanctified them, that the princes of the Israel. You see how chapter 7, verse 1 is a flashback? Remember how the book of Exodus ended? It ended with the children of Israel bringing all the pieces that they had constructed. Moses inspects them and puts them all together on the first day of the second year in the first month. So this is a flashback, actually. And what the book of Numbers does here in chapter 7 is really an interesting lesson. Because, hold your hand here in Numbers and go back to Exodus and notice something. Exodus chapter number 40. Exodus chapter 40, we already looked at verse 17, where the tabernacle was all set up. Chapter 40, verse 33, the end of the verse, so Moses finished the work. Verse 34, then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter into the tent of the congregation because the cloud abode thereon, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. So the glory of the Lord departs and fills that tabernacle, but Moses can't go in. And that's the day that he set it up, and God, sanctified it and acknowledged it. It was, just the way it was supposed to be. So God comes and dwells there. There is actually a gap between verse 35 and 36, because Moses is not able to enter, but then verse 36 and 37 and 38, they're starting to journey. They're up and they're going. So Numbers chapter 7 tells you what happened after the cloud filled the tabernacle. Moses couldn't go in. Chapter 7 of the book of Numbers gives us the dedication of before the tabernacle can now be fully functioning, God is there, they have to dedicate it. And so you have 12 days in Numbers chapter 7 where each tribe brings a specific offering on a specific day. And you have 12 days that transpire, one day for each tribe. Verse 12, and he that offered his offering on the first day was Nahshon of the son of Amminadab of the tribe of Judah. And his offering was 1 silver charger, the weight thereof was 130 shekels, 1 silver bowl of 70 shekels, and 1 shekel of the sanctuary. Both of them were full of fine flour with oil for a meat offering. 1 spoon of 10 shekels of gold full of incense. 1 young bullock, one ram, 1 lamb of the first year for a burnt offering. 1 kid of the goats for a sin offering. And for a sacrifice of peace offerings, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs of the first year was the offering of Nahshon of the son of Amminadab. That guy. That's the tribe of Judah. That's the first day, and they did all of that offering. Notice the 4 offerings there. You have the burnt offering, the sin offering, the peace offering, and the meal offering. Those are the offerings that are laid out in the book of Leviticus, the first 4 chapters. For the sweet savor offerings and the dedication, of the worship of the children of Israel. Now those same numbers are repeated for 12 days, one day for each tribe. Verse 18, the second day was Nathaniel, the son of Zuar, prince of Issachar, did offer. Verse 24, the third day, Eliab, he was of the tribe of Benjamin, of Zebulun. Verse 30, the fourth day is the tribe of Reuben. The fifth day, verse 36, was the tribe of Simeon. The sixth day, verse 42, was the tribe of Gad. Verse 48, the seventh day was Elishama. There's the tribe of Ephraim. Verse 54, the eighth day was for the tribe of Manasseh. Verse 60, the ninth day was Abidan. He's the tribe of Benjamin. Verse 66, the 10th day was the tribe of Dan. Verse 72, the 11th day was the tribe of Asher. And verse 78, on the 12th day was the tribe of Naphtali. That's a lot of offerings. That's a lot of sacrificing. They had to go through those 12 days to dedicate and sanctify the tabernacle that they just built. And you see, initially Moses couldn't go in, right? He couldn't go in, but then Exodus ends with they begin to travel. So then verses 84, 5, 6, 7, and 8 there gives the total. You can take each one of those 12 tribes, take the individual numbers and add them up, and it comes right out there. The end of verse 38. The end of verse 88. This was the dedication of the altar. After that, it was anointed. See, it was set up, anointed. They go through these 12 days. Moses couldn't enter until it was anointed. Verse 89. And when Moses was gone into the tabernacle of the congregation to speak with him, then he heard the voice of one speaking unto him from off the mercy seat that was upon the ark of the testimony, from between the two cherubims, and he spake unto him. And the Lord spake unto Moses. Bingo. Chapter 8, verse 1. My point is they had to go through all of that before Moses had access to go into the tabernacle and speak with God and get the information here. The book of Numbers actually is a flashback to right after the tabernacle was set up, as the book of Leviticus was being given. So it's just fascinating there. Look at all they had to do for the children of Israel and their one guy to have access to God. Do we have access to God? Here, the whole nation, each tribe had to go through the process so that one guy could go in, and eventually it's going to be the high priest, to have access to God. That's quite a process. Then the book of Exodus, the end, picks up that the cloud went up and then they began to journey. So you stick that 7th chapter right in there at the end of the book of Exodus. So, but you and I today, come over to the book of Romans. Just a verse that we quote all the time. I quote, it's probably my favorite 2 verses in Paul's epistles, other than the one I'm studying at the time. But Romans chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. Romans chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom also we have access by faith into this grace wherein we stand and rejoice in hope of the glory of God. We have unfettered, unlimited access at our whim. We can go anytime, day or night. The book of Ephesians, says we have by one Spirit, we both have access by one Spirit unto the Father. Ephesians 3 says we have boldness and access with confidence by the faith of Him. You know, that's something that we have, that we just kind of take for granted, and we can pray and we can talk to the Lord and have direct communion, direct fellowship with Him at any time. Yet when you go back under the law program, it was very, very different for Israel in their national relationship with Jehovah. And it's just one of those things that you get a handle on all of that detail, and you say, wow, look at they had to do all that. And then the altar was sanctified. Then the cloud came up, and then they began their journeying and began going. You and I have access anytime, moment, day or night, on a moment's notice. And we have the Holy Spirit that makes intercession for us. And we have Jesus Christ that makes intercession for us. And we have one God and Father that's above all and through all and in you all. What a precious, precious thing we have. Don't ever take it for granted. So, anyway, that's just one of the things if you begin to think about and think of that and compare it to where we are today. We have a marvelous, us Gentiles, the aliens and the strangers and the dogs that were on the other, the Gentiles didn't even have a right there unless they came and got underneath Israel's table to have fellowship there. It's just a marvelous thing. Numbers chapter 9, the tabernacle is sanctified. Chapter 9, and the Lord spake unto Moses, verse 1, in Sinai, in the first month of the second year, after they were come out of the land of Egypt, let the children of Israel also keep the Passover in this appointed season. So you know what you have there? You have 12 days, and they can observe the Passover on the 14th. I mean, it's just, it's just real. And you know what? They celebrate the Passover. The tabernacle's been dedicated. They've had all the offerings. They've got the instruction. They have the Passover. And what do they begin to do now? Now they begin to journey just like they journeyed at the first Passover when they came out of Egypt. They came out of Egypt. Where did they go? They went to Sinai. Now they've got all this, a year later, and now they're getting ready to go where? To Canaan. They're going to see God's faithfulness. And they have this Passover. They have this memorial to remind them of all the power that God demonstrated back in how he brought Egypt to its knees, and how Pharaoh kicked, and all the spoil that they obtained. Again, to remind them that now they're on their journey toward the land of Canaan. Now they're going to go face the enemies. And they're going to have to go to war and begin to fight. And that Passover reminds them of the power of God that's on their side. So I mean, the table is set, and man, they're just up, and away they go. And chapter 10, verse 1, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Make thee 2 trumpets of silver. Of a whole piece shalt thou make them, that thou mayest use them for the calling of the assembly, and for the journeying of the camps. And when they shall blow with them, all the assembly shall assemble themselves with thee at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. When they wanted to have a congregational meeting, they blew one of those trumpets. They had a signal. And the heads of the tribes would come from their camps and meet at the door of the tabernacle, and they'd have a meeting with Moses. So they had signals. I mean, you got 2 million people out there in the middle of nowhere. You can't send out an email. You can't have an announcement over the radio. So they would have that signal. But then, verse 4, and if they blow but one trumpet, then the princes which are the heads of the thousands of Israel shall gather themselves unto thee. When you blow an alarm, then the camps that lie on the east parts shall go forward. They had a signal to when to start the move of these people. And then chapter 10, Judah and his 3 tribes would go first. Then you'd have Reuben and Simeon and Gad. They would go second. And then you would have the, where is it? Down to verse 22. Ephraim would go third. Verse 25, Dan would go fourth. And intermingled into that bunch is staggered within the groups are the 3 tribes, the 3 families of the Levites that would take the tabernacle apart and load it up in their wagons, and away they go. And you know what they're doing? They're following the ark. The ark is out in front. What a grand procession that was. And I think of the verse in Corinthians, let all things be done decently and in order. And it's just a marvelous thing how God can set it up so that 2 million people in the middle of nowhere can have order and structure and function and carry on, and away they go. Where they heading? They're heading out to the promised land. The sky's the limit, right? So you have the first 10 chapters of the book of Numbers with that first generation. Now they've got the tabernacle. Now they've got the book of Leviticus. They've got the census taken, so they know everybody who's going to go to war. They've got their marching orders and how they're going to travel and how they're going to move. They begin the journey up toward the promised land. That brings you to the middle section of the book of Numbers. And from Numbers chapter 11 to 20, the journey to Canaan begins. And all of a sudden you go, oh, because this is really sad reading. You have this wonderful procession that God's people, they've been separated, they've conquered the Egyptians. God is providing for them. He's leading them in the wilderness with the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. Their shoes aren't wearing out. Then they start in chapter number 11, verse 1. you have the transition now where that first generation begins to journey, and you have they fall in the wilderness. And the unbelief. He takes them right up to the doorstep of Canaan. Actually, not to Canaan, takes them up to Kadesh, Barnea, and that's when the 12 spies go in and the whole thing falls apart. Chapter 11, verse 1, and when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it. And his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burnt among them and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, and the fire was quenched. And he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again, and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? They're hungry. We remember the fish, and which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away, and there is nothing at all besides this manna before our eyes. God puts it right on their doorstep, even, among the camp, even washes the ground. The dew falls on the ground to make the ground nice and wet, cleans the ground, and then the manna drops in. You see an example here? You notice verse 5, when you become discontented and they begin to murmur and complain, we remember the mind goes back to Egypt. And when their mind goes back, their soul and their heart and their flesh follow. See, where the mind goes, that's where your heart goes. And it says, verse 6, but now our soul is dried away, and there is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes. And the manna was a colander seed, and the color thereof was the color of bdellium. And the people went about and gathered it and so on, and they're just getting tired of it. Verse 9 is where the dew fell upon the camp and watered the ground. God cleansed the ground before he dropped the manna there. So the people begin to complain. Moses gets frustrated. Moses gets in the flesh. Moses, he's a great leader, but he had his moments. Verse 11, and Moses said unto the Lord, Wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant? Wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? Notice the focus of Moses on himself. Have I conceived all this people? Verse 12, have I begotten them? Verse 13, whence should I have flesh to give unto all this people? For they weep unto me, saying, Give us flesh that we may eat. Verse 14, I am not able to bear all this people alone, because it is too heavy for me. And if thou deal thus with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of hand, if I have found favor in thy sight. Let me not see my wretchedness. Moses is just all bent out of shape and frustrated here. Do you see how the people can discourage the leaders? People can encourage the leaders too, but here you see Moses just having a snit. And what you see in the rest of Numbers chapter 11, to rectify the situation, we have 70 special men in Israel. And God takes of the spirit that Moses has and puts it upon these 70 heads and elders in Israel, that thou bear it not thyself alone. Moses has some help, and here, so we have the 7 elders that bear and share the burden of the people with Moses. So it helps them here. But the people murmur and complain. Once again, God gets angry and frustrated. Verse number 28, Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of Moses, one of his young men, answered and said, My Lord Moses, forbid them, because there's some individuals that are prophesying there. Joshua is in training with Moses. See here, Joshua is a young man. You have the children of Israel journeying. You haven't really started the wandering yet. So you get to the end of Numbers and the end of Deuteronomy. Joshua is going to be probably in his 60s or 70s, and he's going to take over for Moses. But Joshua is at Moses' right hand here, learning. Verse 31, there went forth a wind from the Lord, and brought quails from the sea, and let them fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side, and as it were a day's journey on the other side, round about the camp, and as it were 2 cubits high upon the face of the earth. Now, a cubit, they say, there are different numbers and measurements, about 18 inches. So the quails are like 3 foot deep. So they want flesh. God gives them flesh. God is demonstrating his provision. He's demonstrated his power. But, the human nature is still human nature. Verse 34, he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattaavah, because there they buried the people that lusted, and the people journeyed from that place unto Hazeroth, and abode at Hazeroth. That's one of the areas where they travel. So they've hit a speed bump. Verse 12, you have Miriam and Aaron challenging Moses' authority. Moses, you shouldn't be, you married an Ethiopian woman. Verse 2, and they said, hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. See, the Lord heard the griping and the grumbling. And the Lord tells Moses and Miriam, and come here, get together at the tabernacle. We're going to have a conversation about all this. That God solidifies Moses' authority. Verse 6, and he said, hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all my house. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches. And in a similitude of the Lord shall he behold. Therefore were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses. God says, Moses is my man. And he's the authority, and I speak with him directly. Don't question his authority. Don't minimize his authority. Don't try to compete with Moses. Reminds me of the Apostle Paul. Paul says, I am the apostle of the Gentiles. I magnify my office. Now, Paul was not patting himself on the back. That was God the Holy Spirit magnifying Paul as the spokesman for the church, the body of Christ. When God sets up an authority, when God sets up an apostle, when God sets up Moses or a prophet, it's a serious deal. And you see the reaction here. God actually smites Miriam with leprosy. He doesn't smite Aaron. Aaron was a spokesman. Aaron did have some authority. He was actually the high priest. But Miriam, he smites with leprosy. And verse number 14, and the Lord said unto Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, that was a sign of disapproval. Should she not be ashamed 7 days? Let her be shut out of the camp 7 days, and after that, let her be received again. Moses intercedes for her. And Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought again. The whole nation's progress is stopped because of the rejection of Moses' authority. Verse 16, and afterward the people removed from Hazeroth and pitched in the wilderness of Paran. I'm going to stop there. There is, this period of time in Israel's history is spoken of twice. Go to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 10. 1 Corinthians chapter number 10, Paul uses this period in the book of Numbers as in a way of admonition for the church at Corinth. The church at Corinth was carnal and divided and quarreled among themselves and all the problems that they had. 1 Corinthians 10:1, moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant. Would not that you should be ignorant. how that all our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And all did eat the same spiritual meat, and all did drink the same spiritual drink. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. They got water in the wilderness. They got meat. They had provision. God gave them everything that they need. He says, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to fight the battles for you. All you got to do is just believe me and go. Verse number 5, but with many of them God was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. They were overthrown by a lack of gratitude, by a lack of focusing on the things that God had given to them, the Passover, and the worship and so on, and they became discontented. And Paul says twice in verse 6, now these things are in samples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. Verse number 11, now these things happen unto them for in samples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. We read these verses back in Numbers, and we say, what a bunch of ungrateful, carnal. Paul says, be careful that you don't fall into the same category. And here the Corinthians had. So there's instruction there. Go to the book of Hebrews, Brother Bill. We've been talking about this. You probably talked about it last night. I wasn't able to be in your class, but the book of Hebrews is laid out here. Hebrews chapter number 3. Hebrews chapter number 3 and verse 8. He says, harden not your hearts, as in the provocation in the day of temptation in the wilderness, when your fathers tempted me and proved me and saw my works. How long? 40 years. There's the 40 years wandering in the wilderness. We're just getting ready in the book of Numbers to see when the hammer finally falls and God judges that first generation. That first generation, they had everything set for them. They had physical provision. They had water to drink. Their shoes didn't wear out. They had the promise of victory. And they're on their way to the promised land. But then you drop down to verse number 19. So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief, their lack of faith. And there's a connection between the book of Hebrews here and the situation there and that generation back in the book of Numbers, and a parallel to the future generation that's going to go into the kingdom. And they have to have faith, they have to labor, they have to trust the Lord, and they have to walk in the power of God. Go back to Numbers chapter 13, and we see here the account of the spies. When they pitch in the wilderness of Paran, they're at a place called Kadesh Barnea. The 12 spies are chosen. The book of Deuteronomy says it's their idea. You read Numbers, it looks like the Lord commissions Moses to send the spies in, but Deuteronomy chapter number 1 says it's their idea. They wanted to do it. So you see the 12 spies, they go in, they bring bounty, but they bring fear with them. It's a land of flowing of milk and honey. Verse 25, and they returned from searching of the land after 40 days, and they went and came to Moses and Aaron, to all the congregation of the children of Israel, into the wilderness of Paran to Kadesh. You can find that place on your map. It's up north. It's heading north from the Red Sea, heading up towards the southern part of the land, but it's not there yet. And you know the story. The people see the giants. They react. They complain. They say, chapter 14 is their reaction. Then they wanted to stone Caleb and Joshua. They want to stone Moses too, I think. Verse 14, all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, would to God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would to God that we had died in this wilderness. And wherefore hath the Lord brought us out into this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey. were it not for us to return unto Egypt. And they said one to another, Up, let us make us a captain, and let's return to Egypt. Full-scale revolt. And this is where God pronounces the judgment. Verse number 11, And the Lord said unto Moses, How long shall this people provoke me? And how long ere it be they believe me? For all the signs which I have showed among them. Listen, signs do not change the heart. One of the things that you see over and over and over again is all that a sign and a supernatural miracle does is create a necessity for another miracle at the next crisis. Signs and wonders do not change the heart. The heart is the issue. He smites them. Moses intercedes once again. Verse number 17, And now I beseech thee, let the power of my Lord be great. As thou hast spoken, the Lord is long-suffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression. Pardon, I beseech thee, the iniquity of this people, according to the greatness of thy mercy, as thou hast forgiven this people from Egypt, even until now. Moses intercedes again for Israel. And the Lord said, I have pardoned according to thy word, but as truly as I live, the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. And you know the story. He says you're going to fall in the wilderness, and your children are going to go in. And I probably spent too much time going through the details here, but this is just fascinating. I'm going to give you one thing here, and then we're not even going to get to the end of the thing here. We'll try to catch up next time. There's something marvelous here. You know, in verse 31, he says, verse 30 says Caleb and Joshua are going to go in, but your little ones, notice, little ones, which ye said should be a prey, them will I bring in, and they shall know the land which ye have despised. But as for you, your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness, and your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years, and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. People in the 21st century are just catching up. They used to talk that way when I was in high school. People got wasted when they did their dope and stuff. Well, they're quoting Bible and they don't even realize it. Now, this thing about the children, it's marvelous. So the judgment is pronounced. Caleb and Joshua, because they had the right spirit, they're going to get to go in. Moses tells these things to the children, and all the children of Israel and the people mourn greatly. Notice what they do. This is something you kind of skip over if you're not paying attention. Verse 40, they rose up early in the morning and gat them up into the mountain, saying, Lo, we be here and will go up into the place which the Lord hath promised, for we have sinned. Do you see how they're going to go even when God says, no, accept your punishment, and there's going to be a delay, and you're not going in because of your unbelief, Hebrews says, but your children, your little children are going to go in. And Moses says, verse 41, Moses said, Wherefore do ye now transgress the commandment of the Lord? But it shall not prosper. Go not up. Moses says, don't go. It ain't gonna end pretty. It ain't gonna be pretty for you. It won't prosper. Go not up, for the Lord is not among you, and be ye not smitten before your enemies. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and ye shall fall by the sword, because you have turned away from the Lord, and the Lord will not be with you. But they presume to go up from the hilltop. Nevertheless, the ark of the covenant of the Lord and Moses departed not out of the camp. So they went anyway. Then the Amalekites came down from the Canaanites which dwelt in the hill, and smote them and discomfited them even unto Hormah. Now you look in your maps, in your Bible. They're in Kadesh Barnea, and they go up and they're smitten at Hormah. That's about 45 miles north. They're going to go up they're going to go anyway. God said, it ain't going to prosper. We're staying put. A group went up there on their own, and they lost. They went anyway and lost. Now the interesting thing is, they're going to take the land by force, and they're going to do it themselves. Go to the book of Matthew, chapter 11. There's a wonderful picture here Matthew chapter 11, and we'll quit with this. We didn't get anywhere near chapter 20, but this is worth the price of admission right here. You know the parallel with the book of Hebrews? And here in Matthew chapter 11, the Lord has been rejected. And he begins to rebuke the people in the cities. Matthew chapter number 11, verse 12. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence. And the violent take it by what? Force. The violent. They're going to try to take it in their own strength, doing it their own way. And all the prophets of the law prophesied until John. You know what? Who are the ones that are trying to take it by force? It's the unbelieving leaders. They're the ones that are stopping the progress because God is not among them. Who are the ones that are going to eventually get to go into the kingdom? The little ones, the little children. The second generation who are going to end up going into Canaan they picture the ones that do go into the land and do enter into his rest, be it under the old covenant and the old program. The unbelievers in Israel, the first generation, picture the unbelievers in the day of the Lord's earthly ministry, who was going to take it by force, by their own efforts in their own way, and God wasn't among them. God moved away from the first generation. Now he's going to be with the little children. And you have this transition. You have this 38-year period where they wander. The first generation dies off, and it's after a delay that the second generation gets to go in and enter into the promised land. It matches what's taking place in the Lord's earthly ministry, because this generation is not the generation of vipers. Isn't going to go in. It's going to be the little ones, the little children, who became like a little child. They're going to go in, but there's still going to be a delay because they got to accept the punishment. There's some discipline and some judgment that's got to come first, and then you get to go into the land. So it's a beautiful picture of what's taking place back there in the book of Numbers, with what transpired at the time of Christ, and there's some marvelous prophecies and things back in there too. So we'll quit there. But Numbers chapter 13 and 14 is when the judgment is pronounced, and there's some more instructions, and they're at Kadesh, and by the time you get to Numbers chapter 20 and then into chapter 21, you've had that 38-year period, and now the second generation is going to be re-instructed and renumbered and prepared for war. And the end of the book of Numbers is that second generation that makes the rest of the journey up. And the book of Numbers ends at the doorstep of the land of Canaan with that second generation ready to go in. But they got to get the book of Deuteronomy first. Moses is going to give one last presentation, and then he dies, and then they go in on Joshua. We'll pick that up next time. So we didn't get as far as I wanted to get, but I trust it's marvelous when you just watch the flow and you see all these things transpire. Do you have a question or a comment? Yes, Richard.
You said Moses was 120 when he died, right?
Correct.
How old was Joshua then?
Joshua is going to be he's probably going to be in his 50s or early 60s at that time, probably, yeah. Because he's a young man as they come out of Egypt. And but he's old enough to be a leader in Israel and be Moses' right-hand man. It's interesting, Caleb is probably older than Joshua, and yet Joshua is the younger. There's that second principle again. The younger is chosen to be the leader. Caleb could have said, well, I'm older. I got the seniority. But anyway, what?
Is the reason nothing was ever really done to Aaron is because he was a high
He was the high priest, yeah. Aaron dies at the end of the 40 years. We're going to see, we see that too. Miriam dies at the end of the 40 years. Moses dies at the end of the 40 years. It's just Moses is the last one to go. But Joshua and Caleb, because Moses gets frustrated too. Moses hits the rock. And God says, well, because you smote the rock, and I just said, speak to the rock, you don't get to go in either. So, okay. Well,
so that's why he didn't.
yeah. I still went longer than I wanted to, but well, that's good. I'm glad you don't mind, Richard. It's just I'm having too much fun. I just enjoy walking through the passages and seeing tracing the geography and the people involved. It's you see human nature put on display, and you're grateful for the program of grace we have. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for this time. Pray that these things would be instructive to us and that your word would continue to captivate us and that we would spend time in it and allow it to become rich and meaningful to us, that we would get to know these people and these events so that we can learn the spiritual lessons that are there and see the instruction that you'd have for us. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right.